Today we're at the reading room of the Special Collections Department, J. Willard Marriott Library at the University of Utah. And today we'll be talking about the Mitsugi Kasai Memorial Japanese American Archives that is housed here in Special Collections. The Mitsugi Kasai Memorial Archives consists of still images, moving images, oral histories, documents, diaries, etc., that are all related to the history of Japanese Americans in the Intermountain West. The Chinese were the first Asian immigrants to come to the United States, and they were basically working on the Transcontinental Railway, and there was a huge racial discrimination against them, and that's very apparent when you see the picture, the famous picture of the meeting of the rails. You see no Chinese railroad workers in that picture. When the Japanese came, they were recruited by a labor agent, E.D. Hashimoto, and he set up an office in what is now Japantown. And he was the one that made arrangements for the Japanese immigrants to get jobs working on the railroad, and also to work on farms, and also to work in the mines. Salt Lake had a thriving Japantown right in the heart of downtown. Because of that, many families came. They started their own businesses, stores, dry goods stores, restaurants, cleaners, and whatnot. This picture here was taken probably in the 1950s or so of the Nagasawa Sunrise Fish Market. The Nagasawa family got fresh fish and their goods and sold it to not only the local Japanese, but there were members of the Salt Lake community that would also shop there. This photo was taken earlier. This is of the Utah Nippo newspaper, and it was the first Japanese language newspaper in the Intermountain area, owned by the Terasawa family. The Utah Nippo was published from 1914 until 1991, and these are examples of actual issues. It originally started as a Japanese language only newspaper, and then later on they added an English section.
This is the headline in the San Francisco Chronicle the day after Pearl Harbor, December the 8th. 1941.
After the attack on Pearl Harbor, life changed for the Japanese Americans who had lived here for, some of them, 40, even 50 years. All of a sudden, they were the enemy. On February 19th, 1942, Executive Order 9066 was signed, ordering all people of Japanese ancestry, and we're talking down to 1/16. If you were even a tiny bit Japanese, you had to relocate to a camp. And these were the instructions that they saw on the telephone poles and around, and they were basically given almost probably a little over a week to get rid of all of their possessions. First of all, they had to report, or they would be arrested if they did not. And then they had a week to get rid of everything. And we're talking quitting their jobs, selling their homes, getting rid of their businesses. My grandparents owned a dry goods store, and they had to get rid of all of their inventory, get rid of pets, their cars, and then decide what they were going to take. The other instructions told them you have to take dishes, bedding, whatnot. So when you're thinking of what you could carry, there wasn't a whole lot more that you could carry, so they had to leave a lot behind. My father's family lived in the Bay Area in Berkeley, and the folks in Berkeley were relocated, first of all, to Tanforan, which was a racetrack, because the camps were not ready yet. So they were in Tanforan, living in horse stalls for about 3 months, and then in September, they moved them to Topaz. It was not finished yet. In fact, it wasn't finished until October.
And now this is the dusty and arid desert of Topaz, Utah, 156 miles south of Salt Lake City, in the Sevier Desert.
When the internees' families were processed, they were fingerprinted and basically given mugshots, and they had to carry certificates, and their belongings were searched. This is this is the certificate for Shujiro Tatsuno, and his family was relocated from the Bay Area to Topaz. Their son, Dave Tatsuno, he was a filmmaker. Dave Tatsuno was able to smuggle in his camera with the help of a friend, and he took footage of the wind blowing, he took pictures of the different events.
Then I got on top of the roof to take a shot of the sea of roofs. And as you look at this picture, you will realize what a waste it was for the government to spend $300 million building 10 camps like this at $1942.
When the government came through to build the camps, they completely cleared the land, so it was totally barren. They were built identically. They had the barracks, and then each one had a mess hall and then a washroom, lavatory area. Everybody, no matter who they were relocated. And so we're talking professionals. We had artists, we had doctors and lawyers and teachers, and everybody was relocated. It was very important to have a newspaper, because keep in mind there were no telephones, there were no radios, no way of communicating to everybody. So that was the only real way they could get information out to the masses. This was a series of cartoons that were published in the newspaper. Some of these you can see from the backs that they were actually published. But these were original pencil drawings. And to me, they're very, very telling of what life was like, everyday life. And this is the proud new papa doing the diapers. This one's one of my favorites. Because the barracks did not have running water, they had to haul the water from the latrine area, actually the washroom. And she's hauling the water, and he's the Superman carrying the teapot. And because the walls were so thin, and because they were people that stayed up late at night, this was called the Midnight Magpie, but they're gossiping and talking, and he's definitely wanting some sleep. So I think with the cartoons, I think you could get away. It's just like with political cartoons. You can get away with saying something without writing it out and getting in trouble well, they would have been censored for sure.
They have now announced that the coast is reopened to the evacuees from January the 15th of 1945. And so this is the relocation or leave-taking of the evacuees going back to their homes. And naturally, those who had homes to go back to were the first ones who were able to leave Topaz, and they're leaving Topaz in this fashion.
After the war ended and the people were allowed to start leaving the camps, it was a big worry for the people who had no place to go. I mean, they lost their homes and everything they owned, basically. And so many of them just went up to Salt Lake's Japantown. They got a one-way ticket, and I think it was $25. And so they went up to Salt Lake City, and many of them got jobs there or stayed with family members and friends there. And some of them ended up staying because maybe they fell in love with somebody and ended up making their home there, but others did go back to California and try to start life over. In the late 1960s, when they built the Salt Palace, they completely demolished all of the buildings that were on the 2 blocks that the Salt Palace now stands on. So the only thing that's remaining now of the heart of Japantown are the Japanese Church of Christ and the Salt Lake Buddhist Temple. Losing Japantown was devastating to these families because it wasn't only their homes, it was their livelihood. They had spent their lives building and raising their children there in the area, and many of them were too old to start new businesses. And so only a few of them were able to relocate. So there was never, again, a concentrated Japantown anymore. The Mitsugi Kasai Memorial Japanese American Archives here in the Special Collections Department at the J. Willard Marriott Library is so important because it will document and preserve these stories of these immigrants who came from Japan, sacrificing their lives, leaving their families behind, some never ever seeing their parents again, working the farms, working the railroads, working the mines, starting businesses, and then losing them again during the war, and then building back up. It's so important for these later generations to know where they came from, what price was paid for their freedom and for their comforts that they enjoy now.